Greetings and salutations, dear viewer. In this segment, we delve into the final critical elements contributing to Israel's unpreparedness for the October 7th attacks, for which commentary we can announce you a surprise guest in one of our coming episodes, which is planned to air still before the holiday season starts. Disclaimer: we did and we will do our best to display you the sources so you can be aware of any potential bias. It is our goal to highlight the key aspects of the war from an analytical point of view, so that you are able to think more critically about this and other fluid conflicts, what we will be expanding on with future basics as well as application episodes. Although a rapid commentary to evolving situations ensures most attention and popularity these days, we plan to refrain from this in the foreseeable future. Especially when it concerns intelligence and/or defense affairs, a fog of war is still lifting, and like in this case, one probably never will exactly know who exactly might have refrained from X or underestimated Epsilon, not even speaking of potential allegations of willful ignorance as outcome Z could benefit player Pastel Pink or. In this special case, our estimations were proven correct within days, yet our professional respect against experiences in many other countries in many other cases in the recent past, we once took a step back from echoing accusations, which we in general all ask to be seen commented with allegedly and give the benefit of a doubt to wait some weeks. Yet as no contradictions to the following came up, we will now dive into the final critical element of Israel's unpreparedness for October 7th attacks. 1. All eggs in one basket. The responsible command staff for the Gaza border was tactically sound, located very close to exactly this border. Yet this tactical advantage becomes a disadvantage if this base is to be overrun first by opposing elements. With a centralized command structure, all higher officers were stationed within this base, which decapitated the responsible forces with a single strike. With no backup plan and unknown amount of individually instilled action by doctrine of lower unit leaders, it was up to anyone capable in the concerned areas to protect, while the initial QRFs, following well-known reinforcing routes, were ambushed and pinned down or destroyed by HMS. Individual gun owners as well as farther away stationed troops rushed in on own accords, reportedly even generals just linking up with peers on site and then starting to coordinate their further advances. No one was prepared for the events, as the non-existence of working backup plans quite clearly illustrates, while footage from an overrun Israeli base showing a platoon of conscripts having gathered being very disoriented and indecisive. The shock and awe effect was maximized, while on the one hand the conscript could have been very short-serving so far, understandably surprised and demoralized, but possibly just not drilled well enough as well as versatile to ever having thought about a situation like this. Not being able to mechanically spring into action as higher tier operators do when a certain level of conditioning is reached. This not as a comment on their individual bravery, but as a situational assessment that they seemed armed and numbered well enough to effectively defend, possibly even take back their base. Further, it is possible that simple safety regulations might have complicated their situations greatly, while we do not have insider information if, for example, emergency reserves of ammo were stored at units' individual barracks, weapons chambers for example. Even the RAF, located within walking distance of the Gaza Strip, lacked adequate security measures. Security personnel were ill-equipped to handle potential threats. Despite the proximity to potential danger, the police present were armed only with pistols and focused more on maintaining order than providing security, putting attendees at risk. The lack of security preparation, especially in the face of internal protest, demonstrated a sense of complacency. 2. Strategic as well as doctrinal over-reliance on technology, how to beat surveillance analysis AI. It further appears that army communications were mounted on civilian cell towers, making communications challenging when therefore destruction of fewer targets cut many means of communications with few strikes. This, as already in many militaries, it is officially prohibited to use one's Sende- und Empfangsmodul 2000, Radio 2000, cell phone for means of coordination, as it is just more convenient, as radios should be weapons chamber material which have to be received under documentation, not even speaking of the usual lack of numbers and often even age and resulting usability, especially in lower tier and training units. And as it is societal ritual in the 2020s, let us speak about AI. As we will show you in our New Year's episode, the military decision-making process is quite extensive and time-intensive, which is why possibly speeding up data collection, grouping, disseminating, analysis production and probabilities proposals based on it is quite and understandably desirable to be automated under use of technology, which can process much more rapidly than single or even teams of analysts.
And since we've started a series on reconnaissance and security, we need to go over the priority intelligence requirements, or PIR. A priority intelligence requirement is an intelligence requirement that the commander and the staff need to understand the threat and other aspects of the operational environment. Now, the reconnaissance formations are the eyes and ears for the commander. They answer the commander's PIRs. The PIRs then drive decision points. Furthermore, the PIRs are then refined into groups and indicators. Indicators are items of information that reflect the intention or capability of an enemy and or adversary to adopt or reject a course of action. Grouping these different indicators helps narrow down the focus so that the commander can then determine the best course of action. And once we have these groups and indicators, then the team assigns specific information requirements, or SIRs, by matching them to a capability. SIRs provide information about a specific threat, activity, or lack thereof at a specific location. Here's an example. We have our priority intelligence requirement. Will the enemy attack within the next 72 hours? That's our PIR. Then we group those. First, group 1 is if they are positioning air defense artillery assets. An indication of this, or an indicator, is if there are any 23s present. Now, to determine this, we need to know some specific information. So the SIRs could be to report any transmission across the J frequency band. Another could be report any light tracked vehicle with a satellite dish. The second grouping that feeds the PIR could be the positioning of fires assets. The indicator is if there are 3 or more BM-21s. The SIR could be report wheeled vehicles with rocket tubes and to report tracked artillery. All of these information requirements feed into and help answer the question the staff and commander are asking themselves. Will the enemy attack within the next 72 hours?
Yet the over-reliance on technology and AI for data processing became a vulnerability. Over time, AI as well as guards got used to marches, demonstrations and groups violating the approach zone yet doing nothing further. If therefore the filtration of these probabilities was left to AI, which was fed repetitive events with non-escalating outcomes over years, the newer mentioned decisive victory doctrine was developed relying on Israel's overwhelming advantage in intelligence, surveillance and reconnaissance. This shall allow smaller, distributed yet interconnected Israeli units to achieve quick and decisive victories with precision strikes. Machine learning identifies targets while precision weapons destroy them. This approach required fewer ground troops, enabling Israel to maintain a smaller but more potent army, reducing the strain on the state budget and bolstering the economy. Its recent shift from cutting the grass to new decisive victory could possibly be another aspect of false sense of security, as 50 years ago and as well this time, opponents were underestimated in capabilities to organize as well as overcome Israel's seeming technological and further superiorities. Israel was relying on its technical prowess to deter, warn and even defend itself, with only 23 lone female spotters monitoring the border, whom became the first casualties of a long and painful day to the IDF.
And indeed, some commentators have hypothesized that the momentum reforms may have reflected concern within the Israeli military establishment that the whole thing was becoming too defensively focused, that Israel was relying too heavily on things like Iron Dome, walls and fixed defences, and in so doing perhaps losing some of its historical offensive edge. A question now is how recent events might shape Israeli military thinking going forward, and what that might mean for the future shape of the IDF.
3. False sense of security and strategic understanding of the opponent. As we already iterated in part 2 of our analysis, Israeli leadership let themselves be deceived, with HMS suggesting they were becoming moderate, which displays a certain amount of naivety to assume a fundamental antagonistic group would change. Others might call it great trust in humanity, but in security concerns one focuses on realities and outcomes, not hopes. While the human intelligence delivered intel to crush Fatah and Islamic Jihad, HMS double agents gained credibility, which should have allowed to deceive from October 7th's preparations even more effectively. Alongside military miscalculations, intelligence failures, and internal divisions in Israel, Hamas demonstrated significant learning and innovation. Israeli leadership talked HMS cared for the good of their people. They opened borders for goods transit, offered work visa, economic chances. Yet rather HMS used water pipes for rocket troops and chose to hurt oneself stratagem, as also discussed in part 2 of our analysis. The belief that the opponent cared for the people's welfare should be shadowed for everyone by now. 4. Inner political struggles and resulting pariah status of intelligence chiefs. As if military errors were not enough, political conflicts compounded the situation. The government under Netanyahu's leadership perceived Hamas as no longer posing a serious threat, allowing them to negotiate politically without making concessions. The internal turmoil in Israel, marked by corruption allegations against Netanyahu, resulted in a shift in focus from general political solutions to securing his leadership. The justice reform, a divisive issue, supposedly also served as a motivating factor for Hamas. The leadership's resistance to intelligence report indicating internal protests as a threat to military readiness deepened the divide between security agencies and political figures. While the responsible secretary, whom is being described as pretty radical himself in regards of settling concerns, political decisions pushed for West Bank settling where there is no iron wall, forcing troop relocation and further complicating the defense strategy in recent years. With areas which used to be covered by a platoon of 3 tanks, only one remained on October 7th. It is sadly quite telling once more that an organization can develop functions as the 10th man after the Yom Kippur War, yet if leadership is unaware of the merits and heartland necessities of these, creating a position that many have come to refer as, that especially Nagy as to one, which role of having to look for the most unlikable and disagree with the majority's consent could have saved many lives. We will be doing episodes on this concept in military as well as business context over the course of the coming year. If, for example, their recommended courses of action for individual units in case of Day X had just been printed and distributed, being kept in a break glass in case of emergency manner all around platoon leaders' office safes. 5. Why HMS will win the information war. Within the political decision spectrum, which is constrained by international law, most often all outcomes are in favor of the insurgent non-state actor. The West itself just recently displayed that it couldn't and probably will never win against cultural separate radical insurgencies as an outsider under use of symmetrical as well as what it defines as asymmetrical warfare. This further as the definitions of victory are so different. While the state actor often struggles to define his own, as allegedly, for example, the word nation building in Afghanistan was just some German mentioned term which then became coalition strategy as no one had too much of a plan when the initial conquest was over.
As I thought about it, I realized that I'd seen VUCA. I'd seen it in Bosnia in '96, I'd seen it in Kosovo 2000, and I saw it in spades in Iraq in 2004. And just like Joshua Ramos said, it only got more complex, and instability was the norm. I think about my first 30 days in Iraq, and Iraq was a volatile place. The ambassador and I were given 30 days by President Bush and Secretary Rumsfeld to go in and make an assessment and tell them what we thought they ought to do. So we were working hard on that. And oh, by the way, I had to form a partnership with the new Iraqi government who'd been in the job 3 days, and we'd never met.
To the militants, as long as they keep up the fight, they are effectively winning, as they wear down not only the occupying troops, but often more important, the occupying state's people.
With every death reported, we have to deal with a public opinion trajectory that slides rapidly from supportive to negative to downright hostile. People just get sick and tired of a moment's silence at a ball game. They just want to be told that it's over.
While themselves garner support and sympathies with every perceived overaction of the state actor.
So we're working that hard. And all of a sudden we're thrust into a major countrywide battle because a young Marine who'd been on the ground less than a week made a wrong turn, drove too close to Muqtada Sadr's house, a gunfight broke out that quickly spread around the holy city of Najaf and then around the whole southern part of Iraq. Something well outside of our control had impacted us at a very inopportune time. That's volatility.
HMS from October 8th on now has had and constantly will have the majority of injured civilians to report on with ever more high quality and more tragic content. As we mentioned in our so far correct standing prognosis on the Ukrainian counteroffensive of 2023, except for especially vigilant, analyzing and such minds already definitely opposed to HMS, there is very little what can be done to keep subconscious sympathization with inhabitants of Gaza rising. To which once again artificial intelligence can contribute its share in rising amount of content hard to falsify, which does not even matter that much once the narrative is out there. Really looking forward to dissecting that 5th generation warfare script. Where were we? Israel is facing tremendous tactical as well as strategic challenges. Some would say nightmare with urban terrain and extensive tunnel networks which are very hard to clear, partially trying to be flooded. Yet for now, they seem rather to be closed than being stormed by the IDF, as a special training is required for such kind of close quarters combat, while the constrained space negates many advantages. Further, it faces humanitarian crisis, with evacuation efforts relocating hundreds of thousands of people, with Israel's premier stating that they intend to rule Gaza indefinitely this time. Israel has managed the territory before and withdrew. Every possible approach has already been tried, and whatever Israel decides to do, it won't root out HMS forever and not keep Israel from losing soldiers, as well as potentially live through another intifada, as every single person they hurt antagonizes so many more each time. With the ongoing ceasefire, recording date is the 30th of November 2023, HMS can reposition as well as resupply, while still over 100 hostages remain in their custody, leaving room to either expand this or enable future operational pauses, with once more Israel being in an inferior position. It also should be noted that not all hostages were taken and are held exclusively by HMS. As is mentioned in part 2, there were multiple factions undertaking exercises as well as executing the attack. If you ever hear of different countries like Egypt or Qatar brokering different hostage releases, this is an indicator for these additional complications. It is imperative for all parties involved to understand the complexities of this situation to achieve a sustainable resolution. Thank you for joining us today, and we hope this report sheds some light on this challenging issue. Please make sure to like, share and subscribe, as for example the US Army Combined Arms Doctrine Directorate, as well as retired General George Casey and the US Army War College will be back for our New Year's episode on military decision-making basics. Hopefully giving you some new impulses for formulating your goals and plans for a very likely even more eventful 2024. We thank you for your attention. This concludes my elaborations.